The caution tape was yellow, which Liam thought was appropriate. Everything about Aunt Gertrude had always been a warning. He stood on the sidewalk outside the estate, the one she had referred to across 15 years of family gatherings as the property, in the specific tone of someone for whom the word property carried a different weight than it did for the rest of the English-speaking world, and watched the federal wildlife officers move through the gate in their khaki and their protective equipment, with the systematic efficiency of people executing a warrant that had taken 6 weeks to build and was now taking approximately 45 minutes to execute. The noise from inside was considerable. Gertrude had been removed from the backyard and was now somewhere near the front entrance, which meant her voice was carrying over the estate wall with the unobstructed projection of a woman who had spent 64 years, ensuring that her opinion was heard in every room she occupied. The content of what she was saying was not entirely intelligible from Liam's position, but the emotional register was clear, and the camera operator from the local news affiliate who had positioned herself near the gate was capturing it with the focused satisfaction of a journalist who has found the perfect sound. Liam took out his phone. He opened the family group chat, the one with 43 members, which had been the primary distribution channel for Gertrude's curated self-presentation for approximately a decade, the venue where she posted photographs of the estate and announcements of her philanthropic activities, and on one memorable occasion, a long message explaining why Liam's choice to work in veterinary medicine rather than a serious profession reflected a certain poverty of ambition. He had a photograph on his phone. It was not a flattering photograph. It was specifically a photograph of a federal wildlife officer escorting a large cage containing what appeared to be a sulcata tortoise of approximately 60 pounds from the rear gate of the estate, with Gertrude visible in the background in the specific configuration of a person who is attempting to prevent something and failing. The news van was in the frame. The caution tape was in the frame. Gertrude's face was in the frame. He posted it. He put the phone back in his pocket. He looked at the estate. He thought briefly about a French Bulldog puppy with respiratory symptoms and an unusual coat of foreign particulate matter, which had arrived in a carrier bag 3 months ago wrapped in a pale blue ribbon, and about the whispered sentence that had accompanied it, and about the expression on Gertrude's face when she had delivered both. He allowed himself, for the first time in 3 months, to smile. But to understand the photograph and the caution tape and the federal officers and the sulcata tortoise, you have to go back to the dinner, which was also, in retrospect, the beginning of the end, though the end had taken considerably longer to arrive than most of the stories Liam told himself about his family. The family dinners happened quarterly. Gertrude hosted them, which was not a decision that had ever been formally made but had established itself over the years through the same process by which most family structures establish themselves, through the accumulation of precedent and the absence of sufficient opposition to change it. The house was large, which meant the gatherings had a scale that smaller venues could not have supported, and the catering was good, which meant attendance was reliable even among the family members who would have preferred not to attend. Liam fell into the second category. He was 31 years old, held a Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree from a program with a 7% acceptance rate, and was the head veterinarian at an animal hospital that had been ranked in the top tier of its category for 3 consecutive years. He also drove a 6-year-old sedan that needed new tires, lived in an apartment that he described to friends as efficiently sized, and had, for the entirety of his adult life, been the object of Aunt Gertrude's most concentrated condescension. This was not a family secret. It was, in the specific way of these things, a family institution, something so established and so consistently performed that the other family members had integrated it into their experience of the gatherings, the way one integrates background music, present and noted but no longer consciously processed. Gertrude had opinions about ambition. Her opinion, stated across 15 years of quarterly dinners with the consistency of a person who had found a truth and was committed to sharing it, was that Liam had insufficient quantities of it, that his choice to care for animals rather than to pursue a profession that operated on human beings, or, preferably, on human beings' financial instruments, represented a failure of imagination. That his apartment, his car, and his salary were the predictable consequences of this failure, She delivered these opinions with the warmth of a woman who genuinely believed she was offering guidance. Liam had learned, somewhere around his mid-20s, that arguing with Gertrude was a category error, not because she was right, but because her positions were not arguments. They were performances, calibrated for the audience of the family room rather than for the purposes of arriving at shared understanding. Engaging with them as arguments was like engaging with a weather system. Theoretically possible to have opinions about it, practically impossible to change it. He attended the dinners, he ate the food. He deflected the opinions with the practiced fluency of someone who had been doing it for a long time. The October dinner was where the puppy appeared. Gertrude had announced the gift before the meal, which was the first indication that it was not simply a gift. "I have something for you, Liam," she said, in the specific tone she used for things she expected to produce a particular effect on the room: warm, performatively generous, with the underlying quality of someone who has planned this moment and is now executing it. "A little something I thought you might appreciate." The carrier bag appeared from the hallway where someone had apparently been holding it in readiness, which meant the entrance had been staged, which Liam noted and filed. Inside the carrier bag was a French Bulldog puppy. He was approximately 8 weeks old, pale fawn with a dark muzzle, and he was sitting in the carrier with the particular stillness of an animal that is not entirely well, not distressed, not dramatically ill, but not the bright-eyed kinetic energy of a healthy 8-week-old puppy. He looked at Liam with the patient eyes of a small creature that has been experiencing something for long enough that it has become the baseline. Liam picked him up. He ran his hands over the puppy's body with the automatic thoroughness of someone for whom this was not a sentimental gesture but a clinical act, noting the slightly elevated respiratory rate, the minor nasal discharge, the quality of the coat. "He's a pedigree," Gertrude said. She had moved close enough to deliver the next part quietly for an audience of one. "Extraordinary lines, rather expensive to maintain in good health." She paused. "Too expensive, perhaps, for someone in your situation, isn't it? The veterinary costs for a dog like this can be quite significant." The smile was exactly what it had always been, warm on the surface, measuring underneath. "But I thought you'd enjoy having something nice for once." The room was watching. Liam looked at the puppy. He looked at Gertrude. He said, "Thank you, Aunt Gertrude, he's beautiful." He took the puppy home. His name, by the time they reached the apartment, was Croissant. This was not a name Liam had planned. It was the name that had presented itself in the car when the puppy had inserted his nose into Liam's jacket pocket, with the specific determination of a small animal who has decided to claim something and is not open to negotiation. And the word had arrived, and it had seemed accurate. Liam set Croissant on the examination table he kept in the spare room, the room that was, technically, his home office but which contained enough equipment that calling it anything else would have been imprecise, and conducted a proper examination. Respiratory, mildly compromised. Not dangerous, not immediately urgent, but the specific pattern of a dog who had been in contact with a respiratory pathogen in the past 2 to 3 weeks. Coat, here was the interesting thing. He used a fine-toothed comb and a collection plate, which was not standard procedure for a domestic dog presentation, but was the procedure he used when he wanted to understand an animal's environment. The particulate matter that came off Croissant's coat was not what he expected. There was standard urban particulate, the baseline found on any animal that had been in the city. There was also something else. He collected it, labeled it, and set it aside for later analysis. It was fine, pale, and had a quality that he recognized from specific professional contexts, not from domestic settings, not from urban environments. He also found soil, not the soil of a city garden, the soil of a place with dense ground cover, organic accumulation, the specific composition of an environment that maintained moisture and sustained a particular range of organisms. He collected that too. He treated Croissant for the respiratory infection, a straightforward course of treatment, 2 days, nothing dramatic, and put the collection plates in his work bag. He sat in the kitchen afterward with a cup of tea and Croissant asleep on his foot, which Croissant had decided was the correct place to be, and he thought about what he had collected. Exotic bird dander. He had recognized it on the comb. Not from any single species, the composition suggested multiple sources. But the profile was distinctive to someone who had spent time in the exotic animal medicine unit during his residency. who had learned to recognize the specific particulate signature of feathered animals that were not native to northern climates and were not commonly kept as domestic pets. He thought about Gertrude's estate. He thought about the high walls she had installed 3 years ago, citing security concern. He thought about the sound he had heard once at a summer gathering from somewhere behind the garden wall, a sound that he had filed away at the time as probably nothing and that he was now, with the collection plates on his kitchen counter, reassigning to a different category. He finished his tea. He went to the window. Croissant snored on his foot with the boneless confidence of a puppy who has found the correct person and is not planning to reconsider. Liam looked at the city outside and thought, she wanted to give me a problem. She had given him a clue. He would need a drone. The drone cost him $430. He bought it on a Tuesday, which was his day off, and spent 40 minutes in the parking lot of the electronics store learning the controls before driving to the neighborhood adjacent to Gertrude's estate. The estate occupied a corner lot in the kind of suburb where lots were large and fences were tall, and the assumption of privacy was so established that it had become, over decades, something close to a right. The walls Gertrude had installed 3 years ago were 11 feet. The drone could go considerably higher than 11 feet. He flew it from a side street 2 blocks from the property, which put him outside the line of sight from the estate's windows and within the legal airspace for recreational drone operation. He had checked this. He had also checked the relevant statutes regarding aerial observation of private property, which were more permissive than most people assumed, particularly in contexts where the observer was not operating the device from a position of trespass. He was standing on a public sidewalk. The drone went up. But before the drone, there was the lab. He had brought the collection plates to the hospital on Monday. His hospital, the one where he was the head veterinarian, which came with a laboratory that had the kind of equipment that made the particulate analysis a matter of hours rather than days. He ran it himself, which he did not always do, but which he preferred when the question was one he had formulated, and the answer mattered to him specifically. The bird dander analysis took 2 hours. The result confirmed what he had suspected from the comb examination, but elaborated it considerably. The sample contained particulate matter consistent with multiple avian species, not the 2 or 3 species you might expect from a domestic aviary or an enthusiastic backyard birder. The profile suggested 8 to 12 distinct species, several of which had morphological characteristics consistent with tropical origin. 3 of the samples contained a specific type of barbule fragment, the microscopic structural unit of feathers, that he had encountered in exactly one professional context. A confiscated shipment that had come through the hospital for emergency treatment 2 years ago, animals seized by federal wildlife officers from an illegal import operation. He sat with the results for a moment, then he ran the soil. The soil took longer. He sent it out to an environmental lab he used for complex cases, with a request for expedited processing. The results came back Wednesday morning. High organic content, moisture-retaining substrate, a microbial profile consistent with an enclosed, humid environment maintained artificially. The specific mineral composition was not native to the region. It had been introduced, trucked in probably, in the quantities needed to support whatever was living in it. He knew what that kind of substrate was for. He had used it himself in the hospital's reptile treatment unit for large specimens that required a maintained environment. Large specimens. He thought about the sound he had heard at the summer gathering, the sound from behind the wall that he had filed away as probably nothing. He tried to reconstruct it now with the new information. Not a domestic animal, not a dog or a cat or even a small exotic pet. Something with more resonance. Something that moved air differently. He booked the drone on Tuesday. His phone rang at 7:30 Monday evening. He knew it was Gertrude before he looked, because she called at 7:30 on Monday evenings with the regularity of someone who had scheduled the call in her calendar, and felt that scheduled concern was indistinguishable from genuine concern. "Liam," she said, the warmth in her voice had the quality of something manufactured to specification. "I've been thinking about the puppy. How is he managing?" Liam was sitting on the kitchen floor at the time, which was where he had ended up when Croissant had decided that the kitchen floor was the correct venue for their evening interaction, and had applied sufficient physical persistence to achieve this. Croissant was currently asleep across his knee with the boneless completeness of a puppy who has no concern. "He's been struggling a little," Liam said. "Oh no," the note of sympathy was perfectly pitched. "The breed can be delicate. I did mention that the costs." "Yes," Liam said, "you did mention that. I hope you're not finding it too overwhelming. There's no shame in acknowledging when something is beyond one's means. I could always." "I'm managing," Liam said. "It's tight, but I'm managing." There was a quality to her pause that he had spent 31 years learning to read. It was the pause of a person who has received information that confirms an expectation they had hoped would be confirmed. Satisfaction, brief and quickly covered. "Well," she said, "you know you can always call if it becomes too much." "I'll keep that in mind," he said. "Thank you for checking in, Aunt Gertrude." He ended the call. Croissant opened one eye, assessed the situation and closed it again. "She's going to call again Thursday," Liam said, "to see if it's gotten worse." Croissant had no comment. The drone went up at 10:20 on a Tuesday morning. The estate was quiet at that hour, weekday, no gathering. The household staff presumably engaged in whatever the household staff did in the middle of a Tuesday morning. Liam stood on the sidewalk 2 blocks away with the controller and watched the feed on his phone screen. The image resolving from the ground-level street view to the elevated perspective that cleared the 11-foot wall and showed him, for the first time, what Gertrude had been maintaining behind it. He stood on the sidewalk for a long time. The garden, if that was the right word for it, which it was not, occupied approximately 3/4 of an acre behind the main house. From street level, the estate appeared to have an expansive lawn with mature plantings, and what the Neighborhood Association's website described as exceptional landscape architecture. From 200 feet up, it looked like something else entirely. The structures were built against the back wall, a series of enclosures that had been constructed with what appeared to be genuine engineering investment, not makeshift pens or improvised cages. Purpose-built housing with climate control units visible on the exterior's drainage infrastructure. The kind of covered sections that suggested year-round habitation of animals that required temperature management. He counted 14 distinct enclosures. Several were connected by covered runs. The largest appeared to be approximately 30 by 20 feet with a climbing structure inside that was visible through the mesh. In the climbing structure, he could see movement. He adjusted the drone's camera and zoom. The animal in the climbing structure was a primate, not a small one. He brought the drone lower, still within legal altitude, still outside the property boundary, and moved it systematically across the enclosure area, recording everything, the camera running continuously. He counted animals where he could see them. A large wading bird in an enclosure near the drainage channel. The plumage and leg structure suggesting a species he needed to look up, but that had no business being in a suburban backyard in this climate. Several reptiles in the temperature-controlled units, visible through panels that appeared to be designed for viewing. In one enclosure near the back wall, 3 animals that moved with the rolling, deliberate gait of something considerably heavier than they appeared. He needed a better angle, moved the drone, and recognized them with a professional certainty that produced a specific, hollow feeling in his stomach. Tortoises, large ones. The specific silhouette of sulcata tortoises, African spurred tortoises, the 3rd largest tortoise species in the world. Animals that could live for a century and grow to 200 pounds and required specialized care, and were listed under CITES Appendix II, meaning international trade in wild-caught specimens was restricted and domestic commercial sale was regulated. He kept the drone moving. He counted what he could count and estimated what he couldn't. By the time he brought the drone down, his phone had 47 minutes of footage, and his professional assessment had moved from "this is concerning" to "this is a federal matter." He spent Wednesday cross-referencing the CITES database, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, which maintained the official listing of regulated species, and the conditions under which they could be legally held was publicly accessible, and Liam had used it in professional contexts often enough that navigating it was not difficult. He worked through the species he had identified from the drone footage, or believed he had identified, noting the listing status of each. The primate, Appendix II at minimum, possibly Appendix I depending on the species which he needed to confirm from the footage. He spent 20 minutes on the recording, freezing frames, comparing to reference photographs in the database. The facial structure, the coloring, the size. He arrived at a confident assessment and looked up the listing. Appendix I, International Commercial Trade Prohibited. The large wading bird, he had initially thought it might be a native species, but the plumage coloration was wrong for the region. He isolated a clear frame, ran a comparison. African origin. Appendix II. The tortoises, confirmed sulcata. Appendix II, with domestic regulations that varied by state but universally required documentation of legal acquisition and appropriate housing standards. The housing he had observed did not meet appropriate standards. The number he had observed, he estimated between 8 and 12 individuals from the footage, was inconsistent with any personal collection that would have received legitimate legal approval. He kept going. The reptiles in the temperature-controlled units were harder to identify from aerial footage, but the body shapes suggested several species that he flagged for further confirmation. The birds in the smaller enclosures, he could see at least 4 distinct species and suspected more. He built a spreadsheet. Species identified or suspected. CITES listing. Estimated number. Evidence quality, strong, moderate, requires confirmation. He color-coded it because he was the kind of person who color-coded things when precision mattered. By Wednesday evening, the spreadsheet had 19 rows. 14 of them were red. Gertrude called on Thursday, as expected. "Just checking in," she said with the warmth that wasn't. "How is the little patient?" "Better this week," Liam said, which was true, and which he delivered with the slight hesitation of a man who is relieved but doesn't want to admit the improvement too strongly. "The vet bills have been something, but he's eating well." "Oh, I'm glad he's improving." The pause, the particular quality of it. "You know if the financial aspect is creating stress." "I'll figure it out," Liam said. "I always do." "Of course you do." A brief, specific silence that was the sound of someone deciding not to say the thing they were thinking because they had calculated that not saying it was more effective. "You've always been so resourceful." He understood exactly what the pause before resourceful contained. "Thanks for calling, Aunt Gertrude," he said. He ended the call. He looked at the spreadsheet on his laptop. 19 rows, 14 red. Croissant walked across the keyboard, which deleted the contents of cell F7, and typed a string of random characters in the formula bar, which Liam corrected without comment. He opened a browser tab. He navigated to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, specifically to the Office of Law Enforcement, which handled cases involving violations of the Lacey Act, the Endangered Species Act, and U.S. obligations under CITES. He had interacted with their regional office twice in his professional capacity, once for the confiscated shipment, and once for a case involving illegal falconry birds. He had the contact information for the regional special agent. He had been professional relationships with this agent for 2 years. He composed an email. It was not a short email. It was precise and organized, and attached to it were 47 minutes of drone footage. The particulate analysis results from his laboratory, the soil analysis from the environmental lab, the spreadsheet with its 19 rows and 14 red entries, and a brief professional biography establishing his credentials as a licensed veterinarian with specific training in exotic animal medicine and wildlife health assessment. He wrote, "I have reason to believe that a private property and address is being used to maintain a collection of exotic and potentially CITES-listed animals under conditions inconsistent with any legal permit framework I am aware of. I am presenting this as a concerned professional and am prepared to support any investigation with my professional expertise. I am not presenting this in my capacity as a family member of the property owner." He read it once. He sent it. He closed the laptop. Croissant had relocated to his lap during the composition of the email and was conducting a detailed inspection of the laptop's screen hinge with his nose. "That's 6 weeks of preparation," Liam said to Croissant, who received this information with the attentive disinterest of a dog who has determined that the information is not food adjacent and therefore has limited immediate relevance. The regional special agent responded the following morning. The response was 4 sentences. The 4th sentence was, "We would like to schedule a call at your earliest convenience." Liam looked at the email. He looked at Croissant. "She wanted to give me a problem," he said. Croissant tilted his head. "She gave me a career highlight," Liam said. He scheduled the call. The call with Special Agent Diane Torres lasted 40 minutes. Liam had prepared for it the way he prepared for complex case presentations, not with a script but with a structure. He knew what he had, he knew its evidentiary value, and he knew the order in which to present it to maximize clarity for someone receiving the information for the first time. He had done this with referring veterinarians, with pet owners processing difficult diagnoses, with insurance assessors reviewing treatment decisions. The skill transfer. Torres was efficient in the way of someone who processes a high volume of incoming reports and has learned to calibrate her attention in the first 3 minutes of a conversation. She recalibrated upward before the 3 minutes were complete. "Walk me through the drone footage again," she said at the 7-minute mark. "The primate enclosure specifically." He walked her through it. "And your confidence level on the species identification." "High," he said. "I've treated the species professionally. The morphology is consistent and I have clear frames from the footage. I can provide annotated stills." The particulate analysis. This was conducted at a licensed facility. "At my hospital, I'm the head veterinarian. I can provide the lab certification and my own credentials." A pause that had a different quality than Gertrude's pauses, the pause of someone who is assembling a picture and is pleased with how it is assembling. "Dr. Kent," Torres said, "how are you related to the property owner?" "She's my aunt." A shorter pause. "And you're comfortable proceeding with this?" "She gave me a sick puppy as a power move at a family dinner," Liam said. "Yes, I'm comfortable proceeding." Torres made a sound that might, in a different context, have been a laugh. "I'm going to need everything you have. The footage, the lab results, the spreadsheet, the soil analysis. Can you have it to me by end of week?" "I sent it with the initial email," he said. Another pause. "You did," she said. "I see it now. That's a thorough package." She paused again. "We're going to need a formal statement and I'd like to bring you in as a subject matter expert on the species identification. Are you available for that?" "Yes." "Good." The tone of someone completing an intake process and moving to the next phase. "I'll be in touch within 48 hours. She was in touch within 24. The investigation took 6 weeks. Liam understood why, even though 6 weeks felt, at certain points, like a significant amount of time to wait. Federal warrant applications required documentation at a level of specificity that went beyond what his initial package provided, not because his package was insufficient, but because the legal standard for the warrant required confirmation of what he had identified, corroboration through independent channels, and a chain of evidence that would survive the kind of defense that a wealthy property owner with a good attorney would inevitably mount. Torres kept him informed at the level she was able to keep him informed, which was not comprehensive but was enough for him to understand that the process was moving. He continued going to work. He continued receiving Gertrude's Monday evening calls, in which she continued to inquire about the puppy with the specific warmth of someone awaiting confirmation of a prediction. He continued performing the version of himself she expected, the nephew managing, the nephew finding it difficult but keeping it together, the nephew who was, fundamentally, not quite equal to the finer things. He was exceptionally good at this performance. He had been practicing it, after all, for 31 years. The confirmation call from Torres came on a Thursday afternoon in the 3rd week. "We've conducted additional surveillance," she said. "Your species identifications are confirmed on 14 of the 19 entries. The remaining 5 are under evaluation, but we have reasonable confidence on 3 of them." She paused. "The primate is confirmed appendix. We've also identified 3 species not in your original assessment that were visible in subsequent surveillance imagery." "What species?" She named them. Liam was quiet for a moment. "2 of those are critically endangered," he said. "Yes," Torres said. "The 3rd is prohibited from private ownership in this state entirely, under any circumstances." "Yes," Torres said again. "The warrant application is in front of a federal judge. We expect a decision within the week." He looked at Croissant, who was conducting a thorough inspection of the gap between the sofa and the wall for reasons that remained opaque. "The animals," he said, "when the raid happens, they'll need veterinary support. We have a wildlife rehabber on call and we're coordinating with the city's animal control. But if you're offering..." "I'm offering," he said. "I'll note it," Torres said. "We'd want you there in an advisory capacity, not as a primary responder, given your relationship to the owner." Understood. Warrant should come through by end of week. He ended the call. He went to his laptop. He opened the CITES database entry for the 2 critically endangered species Tors had named and read through the conservation status section. The population estimates, the primary threats, the notes on captive animals and their welfare requirements, the reasons why private ownership was incompatible with their behavioral and physiological needs. He read for a long time. The dark comedy tone he had been operating in for 6 weeks shifted slightly. Not entirely, Gertrude remained in the overall architecture of the situation a figure of considerable absurdity. But the animals in the enclosures were not abstract. They were specific creatures in specific conditions that were not appropriate to them. And they had been there for an unknown amount of time. And what happened to them after the raid would matter in a way that was not funny. He called the hospital and arranged for the trauma stabilization suite to be available on a flexible basis over the following 2 weeks. He made a list of what they would likely need. He went back to work. The warrant came through on a Friday. The raid was scheduled for Saturday morning, which Tors explained was standard practice for residential operations of this type. The day of the week when the property was most likely to have its full animal population stable, and in their enclosures when the owner was likely to be present, when media notification could be managed in a way that served the investigation's public communication goal. He arrived at 7 a.m., as Tors had requested. He was there in his capacity as a consulting expert. He had his hospital credentials, his CITES species identification documentation, and a bag of emergency veterinary supplies that Tors had reviewed and approved. He was wearing his professional clothes, not the white coat, which would have been a costume choice, but the practical clothes of someone who expected to work. Tors was already on the sidewalk. She looked at him. "You look remarkably calm for someone who's about to watch their aunt get arrested." "I've been waiting 6 weeks," he said. "I've had time to process." She almost smiled. "The media is coming at 7:30. We're going in at 7:15. Any welfare concerns I should know about going in." Based on surveillance, the primate is in a single enclosure and hasn't been observed in interaction with other animals. The tortoises appear physically intact, but the enclosure substrate is not appropriate. "The birds," she stopped, "will assess on site." "Okay," he said. "You ready?" He thought about a puppy in a carrier bag with a pale blue ribbon, and a whispered sentence about expensive things and people like him, and a family dinner where the performance had been polished to a shine. "Yes," he said. The gate opened at 7:14. The federal wildlife officers moved through it with the systematic efficiency of a team that had been briefed, had walked the plan, and was now executing it with the particular focus of people who had done this before, and understood that the first minutes of an operation like this determined the shape of everything that followed. Liam followed Tors through the gate. He had seen the property from 200 feet up, through a drone camera, in 47 minutes of footage. Seeing it at ground level was different in the way that all ground-level experiences are different from aerial ones. The scale changed, the detail came in, the smell arrived, which aerial footage did not capture. The smell was significant. Not terrible, not the smell of neglect or suffering in the most acute sense, but the specific layered smell of many animals in an enclosed space, with the warm, organic complexity of the substrate he had identified from the soil sample, and underneath it the harder-to-name quality of animals that were not quite where they were supposed to be. He went to work. The primate was a young male, which was worse than an adult in some respects because the behavioral damage from inappropriate early development was harder to reverse. He was sitting in the corner of the enclosure when Liam reached it, watching the activity in the yard with the specific stillness of an animal that has learned that stillness is the safest response to human activity. Liam crouched at the enclosure mesh. He did not approach. He did not make direct eye contact. He spoke quietly, not to communicate information but to establish presence, to give the animal something consistent and non-threatening to orient to. The wildlife rehabber appeared beside him, a woman named Chen who worked with the regional primate sanctuary and had been called in by Tors specifically for this case. She looked at the animal for a moment. "How long do you think?" she said. "Based on the behavioral presentation and the enclosure size, at least a year, probably longer." He looked at the climbing structure, the space, the single enrichment item in the corner that was wholly inadequate. He's been alone. Yeah, Chen said. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, let's do this right. They did it right. Liam moved through the enclosure area for the next 2 hours with the focused attention of his professional best, assessing animals, triaging welfare concerns, directing the rehabbers and the animal control officers on the species-specific handling requirements that the more generalist responders needed, documenting everything with his phone camera for the case file that Tor's team was building in parallel. The tortoises were, as he had assessed from the aerial footage, physically intact. The substrate was wrong, but the animals were robust. Sulcata tortoises were resilient, which was partly why people acquired them without understanding what they required. 8 individuals. He noted the conditions, the estimated ages, the absence of appropriate basking infrastructure. The birds were more complicated. 3 of the enclosures contained birds that required immediate intervention. One with a respiratory presentation that he recognized from professional experience as serious. One with a wing presentation that suggested an old injury that had not been appropriately treated. One that appeared behaviorally acute in a way that required assessment before transport. He spent 40 minutes on the birds. He was still with the second enclosure when he heard Gertrude. She had been in the main house when the officers entered, which meant she had had approximately 15 minutes of awareness that something was happening before she came outside. This was enough time to get dressed, which she had done fully, in the specific way of a woman who considers her appearance a form of argument, and to compose herself into the version of herself she deployed for situations that required the performance of authority. She crossed the lawn toward the enclosure area. Tors intercepted her before she reached Liam. What followed was a conversation that Liam did not participate in and could only partially hear, but the shape of which was legible from 10 meters away. Gertrude presenting her position as a property owner with rights that were being violated. Tors presenting the warrant with the specific calm of someone who has had this conversation before and knows how it ends. Gertrude escalating. Tors remaining steady, Gertrude escalating further. The news van had arrived at 7:30. The camera operator had a clear sightline to the enclosure area from the open gate. Gertrude's face, when she realized the cameras were running, went through several configurations in rapid succession. The performance of authority gave way to the performance of being wronged, which gave way to something that dropped the performance entirely and was simply rage. The specific, uncontained rage of a person who has never, in 64 years, encountered a situation they could not manage through the force of their social position. She caught Liam's eye. She said his name. The content of what followed was extensive and not entirely composed, and was being captured in high definition by a camera operator who had worked long enough in local news to know when she had the shot. Liam looked at her for a moment. He reached into his pocket. He took out his phone. The photograph was the one he had taken 20 minutes earlier from the sidewalk as the first cage had come through the gate. The federal officer, the sulcata tortoise, Gertrude in the background in the configuration of a person who is attempting to prevent something and failing, the news van in the frame, the caution tape bright yellow in the morning light. He opened the family group chat. He posted the photograph. He put the phone back in his pocket. He returned to the bird enclosure. The family group chat, Tors told him later, was the detail that made it into 3 of the 4 news reports. She had seen the notification come through on her own phone. She was, it turned out, connected to a family member who was a member of the group, and had watched the response accumulate in real time while she was managing the scene. 43 family members, 37 responses in the first 4 minutes. He did not read them until that evening, when Croissant was asleep on his foot, and the day had settled into the quiet of a thing completed. He scrolled through them with the specific attention of someone reviewing a document rather than experiencing a social moment. There was shock, which he had expected. There was the specific quality of response that people produce when something they have long suspected has been confirmed in public and irrevocable terms. There were 2 family members who had, apparently, had their own concerns for some time, and expressed these with the relieved urgency of people who had been waiting for permission to say the thing. There was nothing from Gertrude. There would not be, he supposed, for some time. He visited her at the station on Monday morning. He had not planned to, It was not something Torres had suggested or that his attorney had recommended or that any practical purpose required. He went because there was a thing he wanted to say, and because saying it in a room where she could not perform her way out of the conversation was the only context in which it was worth saying. She was in a consultation room with her attorney when he arrived. The attorney, having reviewed the situation, was not projecting confidence. Gertrude was wearing the kind of composure that comes from the sustained effort of maintaining composure in conditions that do not support it, held together, but effortful in a way that her composure was not usually effortful. She looked at him when he came in. He was holding croissant. He had brought croissant because croissant was, technically, the beginning of the story, and because croissant was also the point. Not the revenge, not the legal consequences, not the photograph in the family group chat, but the small creature with the dark muzzle who had been given as a weapon and had become, in the way of animals with the right people, simply a dog. Croissant looked at Gertrude with the benign, untroubled interest of a dog who has no history with this person, and is therefore evaluating her entirely on her current presentation, which was finding her unremarkable. "He's healthy," Liam said, "in case you were wondering." Gertrude looked at Croissant, at Liam, at the attorney, at a fixed point on the wall. "You did this," she said. Not an accusation, an observation, the flat statement of a person who has arrived at clarity about a sequence of events. "You gave me a sick puppy," Liam said. "I'm a veterinarian. You gave a sick puppy to a veterinarian who is also the relative of the person responsible for the puppy being sick. And then you hoped I'd call and tell you I couldn't handle it." He looked at her. "That was the plan, right? I'd call and you'd have the satisfaction of." "Liam, I'm not angry," he said, which was true. He had gone looking for anger on and off across the 6 weeks and had found it occasionally, but had found underneath it, more consistently, the specific and durable satisfaction of a person who has been underestimated by someone they love in a complicated way, and has turned out to be considerably more than the estimate. "I just wanted you to see him, since he was the beginning of all this." He stood. Croissant, who had been conducting his evaluation of Gertrude's shoes, looked up at Liam and then at the door with the clear preference of a dog who has completed his assessment of a room and is ready to move on. "He sends his regards," Liam said. He left. The charges when they were filed were substantial. Illegal possession of protected wildlife under the Lacey Act, violations of CITES implementation regulation, state-level charges related to animal welfare standards. The federal charges alone carried potential sentences that Gertrude's attorney was, based on publicly available court filings, working hard to mitigate. The estate was subject to asset review as part of the federal case. The animals were transferred to accredited sanctuaries and rehabilitation facilities over the course of 3 weeks. The primate went to a facility that specialized in behavioral rehabilitation for socially isolated individuals. The tortoises went to a rescue organization that had the appropriate space and expertise. The birds went to various specialists based on species and condition. The critically endangered individuals, the 2 species Torres had named, went to facilities participating in international conservation program. Their presence in Gertrude's backyard was, Torres told Liam, a significant development in the federal understanding of a trafficking network that had been under investigation for 2 years. The estate had been a transit and holding point, not just a personal collection. He absorbed this on a Tuesday evening after a 12-hour day, with Croissant asleep across his knee. He thought about the soil, the shipped-in substrate, the infrastructure investment, the climate control units, the engineering of a place designed to receive animals and hold them for an unspecified period before they moved somewhere else. He thought about 64 years of a person who had looked at everything in the world and calculated its value to her. He thought about what that looked like when the calculation included things that should not be calculated that way. He scratched Croissant behind the ears. Croissant made the sound he made when the scratching was in the correct location, which was a sound of complete and uncomplicated satisfaction. "She wanted to destroy my life with a lie," Liam said, to no one in particular. Croissant opened one eye. "I destroyed her reputation with the truth," he said. He looked at the window, at the city outside doing its ordinary evening things. "And you," he said to Croissant, "are the best $430 I ever spent on a drone." Croissant closed his eye. The evening continued, quiet and sufficient, and outside the window nothing in particular was happening. And inside the apartment, a man and a dog who had both come through something were simply sitting in the specific piece of people and animals who have found the correct arrangement and are not planning to change it. She had spent her life looking down on others. Now she was looking through bars. He was looking at a sleeping French Bulldog named Croissant. He felt on balance that he had the best